Hi, BookTube. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and I'm deciding to go ahead and do a review of Dracula, which I just finished. I finished it a few days ago as I'm filming this video. And I'll also update you on a little bit of how October is going. So this is my second time reading this book, and I gotta admit, the first time I read this book when I was a teenager, it kind of bored me at that time, but I definitely like it a lot better this time around. I'm pretty sure most of you know the story of Dracula, the famous, infamous Count, and so this was published in, the copyright date. Let's see if I can find the copyright date. This particular one was published in 2012, this particular edition, but the original copyright date is, okay, well, the only date I see on here is, I think the video I watched last night said it came out in 1897. I think I want to say that's because I watched some reviews on other reviews of this book last night. This is written in epistolary format, which is basically it's written in letters, diary entries, telegrams, and it's a multi-perspective story, which I think it actually helps the story a lot because you're not just getting one person's diary entries, you're getting multiple characters. And first we start with Jonathan Harker, he is a clerk, aka a lawyer. He is told by his boss he needs to go visit this Count Dracula in Transylvania because he wants to buy some land in a house in London. And he is sent to go visit him, and right away when he gets there, he notices a lot of weird stuff, like the behavior of the townsfolk. They're all very scared of this guy, and there's like a lot of wolves around the area, which kind of unnerves him. And then there's this mysterious blue mist that's all around the place. And when he gets there, he is requested by Dracula that he needs to stay for a whole month without contacting his fiancée, Mina, or anyone else for that period he is there. So we get his diary entries and his observations, and there's a lot of weird shit going on at this castle, like this, including he has this very erotic encounter with these women, these Draculas and mistresses, vampires. Of course, he doesn't know that this is a vampire at the time, and I imagine when this first was published, people probably were surprised and didn't know what the heck was going on. They didn't know about vampires. Well, although maybe they did, because Carmilla, I think people say that Bram Stoker was inspired by Carmilla, which is another vampire novel, but it's centered around a female vampire. So maybe people had some idea what vampires were. You also get Mina, his fiance's perspective, and she's very worried because she's only got one letter from him, and she's staying with her best friend, Lucy, and all of her letters in the first part of the story are her worrying about Jonathan, but also her diary entries are all about her worrying about Jonathan, but we also get her time with Lucy, and her concern about Lucy, who she sees her flirting with 3 guys, and she also, Lucy starts acting all weird, after this strange night where she started sleepwalking again, which she used to do as a child. And she starts acting really weird and starts getting very ill and, starts losing blood really quickly. And and we get her diary entries as well. We get a few of her diary entries too. Not a lot, but we get a few diary entries from Lucy. And the one of the other main characters is Dr. Seward. And he was one of Lucy's potential suitors. He was very much in love with her, so a lot of his diary entries involve him pining after Lucy, but we also get, which I think was very intriguing, very interesting personally. I know not everybody, some people probably find this boring, especially with him pining over Lucy as well in the diary entries. But his observations of a particular patient, Renfield, who had gone to Transylvania, and ever since he came back, he's been acting really weird. He's eating all these bugs and stuff and saying blood is, and that's where you get the whole blood is life, because he's trying to consume the life of these various animals that are small enough for him to eat. And he's cryptic in the way he talks, so you can't always understand him, but also he's very blunt, and if he doesn't like a person that he interacts with, then he'll straight up tell you. So Renfield was definitely one of my favorite characters, because he's just so interesting. The book, now I do notice in the 1992 movie adaptation, we don't get a lot of him in the adaptation. We do get the significant, scenes and stuff, the important moments, but of course because it's a movie, they couldn't include everything, so we don't get as much of him in the movie. That's the only, but other than that, I know this is blasphemous, but I do kind of like the movie a little bit more than the book, in all honesty. That movie, anyway. So we get Dr. Seward's observations, and I think that's really the only characters we get. I mean, occasionally we get Van Helsing as well. We get some of his, but mostly but we don't really, but like it's when he needs to give important information, then we might get, now of course, the only thing about making this a diary based on all diary entries is that there are scenes that, where if this was a real diary and wasn't a book, then there are scenes that you wouldn't get in someone's actual diary, because there's no way they would remember word for word exactly the exact dialogue. But of course, for the sake of the story, they have to include, they make it where the character perfectly recalls the whole conversations and everything that was said. Another character I like was Van Helsing. He's another character that's kind of blunt, and he gives all the information. So a lot of his scenes are a bit can be long-winded, because he explains a lot of stuff. And this is actually this was the, today's, like I said, I don't know about Carmilla, I have not read that, but a lot of the stuff in this book, from what I know, is stuff that are the things that we know about vampires today. Like, obviously they existed before Bram Stoker wrote this, but there's a lot of the things that we know that can harm vampires, like the garlic thing, which I've always thought was kind of silly. But that it came from this, and then the whole Christianity thing, the Christian cross being, which makes sense because vampires are meant to be demons, they're monsters. And this book is not, definitely not, there's no romance in this book, or at least not with the vampires. Vampires, I mean, like I said, there are some erotic moments, like when Jonathan Harker gets, has the encounter with the female vampires. Then that gets pretty erotic, and pretty dirty, and it's even 10 times more so, I think, in the 1992 movie. And although I do, now, as someone who, I do believe in God and stuff like that, but there were moments when I was like there's a scene where Mina is telling them, oh, we shouldn't hate Dracula, and, we shouldn't fight him with hate, and something along those lines, which, I understand that. I'm assuming that Bram Stoker was a Christian and believed in God, and, and saw these vampires as demons, and I understand that, but there were times I was like, okay, this vampire has done a lot of bad shit, and this vampire has kept her husband, Jonathan Harker is Mina's husband at that point, imprisoned, and he has, and this is an old book, so you know what, maybe I'll mention something in my little description box below me, like, if you have not read this book, then this review will contain spoilers, but, I think it's a pretty old book, so I think most people have probably read this, or at least seen one of the adaptations. Know that Lucy basically becomes a vampire, and then he goes after Mina and targets her, and Mina is starting to supposedly transform at that point, which to me was like the slowest transformation. Like, you could tell more that Lucy was being affected by the vampire, by Dracula than Mina was. It was like there was only a little things here and there, like at one point they say, Van Helsing says, oh, her teeth are now starting to get sharper, and they keep mentioning how she's sleeping a lot, and how she's getting paler because she's losing a lot of blood, but other than that, there was really nothing. I feel like I could hardly tell, except that she was being turned by Dracula, but, like, that part when she's like, oh, we shouldn't hate Dracula, we're not going to kill him with hate, it's like, what, do you want them to kill him with love? He's a vampire. He killed your friend, turned her into a demon, and he went after you next, and you're slowly turning into a demon because of him, and kept your husband imprisoned in his castle for a month. And, like, and no, she doesn't know all the details, although she might know it by that point, because I think at that point she might have read Jonathan's journals, his diary entries, because they end up having to put together when they realize what's really going on, they put together everyone's diaries to get each of the bits and pieces, because that's another benefit of the story, is that another benefit of how the story is written, they each that you're getting the whole picture just in bits and pieces, but you're not just relying on one person where you don't know, where it's like unpredictable. You could potentially, they might be exaggerating the truth, or you don't know if they're telling the truth or not. But because, of course, you're getting different people's points of view with these diary entries, then you can safely assume that it's probably pretty accurate to what's going on. And so they put them all together in one big, like, Mina, who has learned to type and stuff because Jonathan requested her to learn it. So she's developed these skills to be able to type and stuff. And so she and Jonathan put all the diary entries together to help them figure out what's going on in the whole Dracula's plan and everything like that, and where his hiding places are. And so she knows. So I think at that point she does know what happened to Jonathan, what his experience in the castle was like. And it's like, so your husband went through all this stuff, and you're all like, oh, we should pity Dracula. And it's like, it's kind of, I know he was human at one time, but I felt more pity for Dracula in that adaptation than this book. He was clearly a monster in the book. It's a story of good versus evil, and which, by the way, this is not Dracula. Even though Dracula's the title character, he's not in the book that much. He's in the beginning of the book with Jonathan's experiences, so we develop the weirdness and the creepiness and the atmosphere. But he is like, which that's one of the positives. This book has a great creepy atmosphere. It's not scary. It's more just creepy and intense, and you don't know what's going to happen, especially if you're reading this for the first time. Of course, if you know the story, and this is my second time reading it, and, even though it's been a long time since I read the book, I've seen the 1992 movie, so I know how it turns out. But it's still just the way he builds up the suspense and this creepiness to the story, and the how and builds up Dracula and how dangerous and scary he is brilliant. It just really unnerves you. Like, it doesn't like make you. I mean, maybe if you're like me and you think too much about it, maybe it could scare you. Like, but I know the story, and with today's pop culture, you see so many different types of vampires, and you have things like Twilight, with where they make vampires not that scary and almost like just misunderstood and tragic, which is kind of with the 1992 movie. I mean, I feel like Gary Oldman's Dracula was still scary, was still intense and creepy, but there was a romanticism to him, and he did come off as a bit of a tragic figure, but still a little bit scary. Like, still stay true to the fear part. Like, but anyway, so that's one of the things that this book does best is, like, I like the format. I think the format is really, I like the format. I think it fits. Like, I definitely think with the Episcopal Terry format, I think it depends on the story itself. As I said in my review, if it's, a book like Pamela where it's a woman being harassed by her boss because he's attracted to her and wants her and desires her, or if it's a young woman coming out into society and, trying to, like, survive a society where people are constantly manipulating her, then I'm not going to be as into the plot. But this one, they're hunting a monster. They're hunting a vampire. So it makes it more interesting getting these observations. I mean, and I really enjoyed, like I said, I like Dr. Seward's parts because his observations of Renfield were very intriguing. I mean, not everybody, I'm sure there will be a lot of people who find it kind of boring, but I personally liked it. His, observing Renfield and how weird Renfield was and how creepy he was and how he kept eating these creepy little bugs and stuff. And he was honest and blunt, but he also was like, he wanted to worship his master. And like I said, I wish he'd been a little bit, but maybe they couldn't really. I think maybe it was enough in the movie, but, and, what else was I gonna say? I also, like I said, so anyway, it just kind of bugged me, her reaction to Dracula. Like, I mean, granted, maybe it was, Bram Stoker's intention. It was his way of showing, oh, she's being influenced by Dracula, so she feels sorry for him and doesn't want them to hurt him. But it's like, so maybe you could argue that, you can make that, but to me, I didn't interpret it like that. I just interpreted it as her being like, oh, I'm a good little Christian, and like I said, I am Christian and I do believe in God, but I mean, in certain plot situations, it's like, okay, enough being passive. You're dealing with a monster here. They're beyond being redeemed. Of course, that's in the context of this original story. Like, in other today's vampire looks at vampires, which I'm not one of those people who has a problem with how vampires were portrayed in pop culture. But I imagine Bram Stoker had a problem with it, and I know there's a lot of people who do not like the romanticism of vampires, especially if you go as extreme as Twilight, which I have mixed feelings about, because I definitely see people's problem with Twilight, but I don't hate it. I don't hate Twilight as much as some people. In fact, I roll my eyes when everyone makes that same old joke of still a better love story than Twilight. That, to me, that kind of annoys me, but I understand people's frustration with Twilight and annoyance with it, and it only makes it worse with the whole, her whole thing with the Native American portrayal and how it comes off as really disrespectful to the culture of Native Americans. But that's a whole nother story. So I get their frustration with Twilight and how the Cullens are portrayed, especially Edward. I mean, even Robert Pattinson, who played him and knows that it made him a lot of money, even he makes fun of it. And it, as much as I get annoyed with people, it's still, I gotta admit, it is funny seeing him criticize it. But, and mock it, now that he's no longer part of it and he's moved on. So, yeah, so this is truly a horror story. There's no romance except for, Lucy and her 3 guys, and, which I kept expecting there to be like, I'm so used to modern stories where when there's a love triangle where the two people fighting over the girl are fighting, actually butting heads and don't like each other, and these guys actually like each other, they respect each other. And I have mixed feelings because I'm like, okay, why aren't you guys fighting? I mean, you at least have one moment where you don't agree with each other or butt heads, which I guess in the situation, it's like, well, yeah, we need to come together. We don't need to waste time, trying to compete with each other, and we need to bow out gracefully. Like, Arthur wins because Arthur's the guy that she chooses, Arthur Holmwood. It was Arthur Holmwood, Dr. Seward, and then there's this Texan guy named Quincy Morris. And they're all likable and charming guys, But of course, considering the time period and how, how things were, I can, understand to some extent why she chose Arthur over the other two. Because, the doctor wasn't, back then doctors don't make as much money, I don't think. And, I don't know what Quincy Morris did. And she might have to go to America. And she might not like that. She might not want to leave to go to America. So it was more, I think Quincy was more fun. And he's the only one in the story who actually takes action. Like, Arthur is so worried for Lucy, so upset and distraught, and just, I feel like he doesn't do anything. And then Dr. Seward does do something, but he doesn't do, like, he's more, he's not, like, Quincy is more like that kind of character. So I really shouldn't say Quincy Morris the only one who did anything, because Dr. Seward and Jonathan did stuff too, of course. And Arthur was, shocked and, shocked and dismayed. He was, his fiance just got turned into a monster, and then they had to kill her, chop off her head, and all that gruesome, gory stuff. So I really shouldn't say, because Dr. Seward, he's the one who contacts Van Helsing and brings him in, and Van Helsing is the one who gives them the information they need. He's the one who tells them how to defeat the monster, how to defeat Dracula. So he played, so that's what he does. It's not, and granted, Quincy's methods could potentially get him killed. But I like them, and, someone pointed out, because I've never seen any other adaptations or any of the other, other versions of Dracula, but a lot of people say that a lot of adaptations don't include all three guys. They all put them just in one guy for Lucy, and the 1992 movie actually includes all three of those guys. They're all there. So I think that's kind of nice. Imagine, especially if you've seen other versions of this work, other adaptations of this work. But anyway, I was kind of, well, first, before I talk about what I was just going to talk about, also, I don't, like, once again, I have to remind myself that this is an old book, it was written a long time ago, so the way they treat female characters just kind of bugs me, but I have to remember to, considering the time period, but, like, they refer to the two female characters as child. To me, it's a little weird, and, I also don't like, and they're both so passive and, like, good little girls, and like, when the girls start becoming vampires, it's like they're a lot more sexier, and you can almost be a little bit like, oh, so now they're sexy, and God forbid they become sexy, and, it's like, they're little hussies now, so we gotta kill them, we gotta stop them from being little hussies. They need to stay our good little girls again, and, which I can't take credit for that criticism, because someone pointed that got pointed out to me indirectly by a reviewer. A reviewer pointed that out, and I was like, yeah, actually, yeah, that's very true. It's kind of funny that whole vampires being sexy thing, I guess, like, I think that wasn't introduced here. I think that was introduced in Carmilla, because, it's a female vampire, and I think there's also a female, I don't know if you call it romance necessarily, but a female erotic relationship between the Carmilla and another, and mortal woman, which I don't know. I'm going, from the bits and pieces I've heard about Carmilla, because I've obviously have not read the book. So it's just funny that all of a sudden they're all sexy and, voluptuous and stuff and dangerous, and because they're too sexy and, like, which I guess, fits what's been established about vampires. And, there was clearly a message in the novel, like you could say that the whole, turning to vampires is a metaphor. Women need to stay pure and innocent, and if they turn to vampires, they're no longer innocent and pure. And what really bugged me is when they start where they need to go track down Dracula and battle him. What really bugs me is that they're like, oh, Mina's too delicate. Her sensibilities are too delicate. She can't handle it. So we're going to send her to her room and tell her to go to sleep. And then, surprise, surprise, Dracula shows up and targets Mina and bites her, and it's like, you were the ones who told her to stay in her room, and because she be a good little girl and she can't handle it. Like, just because you're guys does not mean you can't handle it. You can handle it better than she can. And she ends up being a victim of Dracula. And so they learned the hard way that they need to keep her in the loop. Because they were going to be like, oh, we can't tell her anything. And then it backfires on them. And it turns out that she needed to be, that maybe it was best, especially because this girl is her best friend was a victim of Dracula. She deserves to be a part of it. And they are so worried about her delicate sensibilities that they're like, oh, we have to keep her out of the loop, even though it was her friend and her husband. Like, I think they're too protective of her. They think she's so delicate. And then, of course, there's the whole, she has a brain like a man. Really? You're gonna go there. But, I mean, can you, of course, considering how things were back then, of course, Bram Stoker, you could argue that he thought like that for a reason. That's how it was back then. That's how they saw women back then. Although, I recently watched someone talking about Wilkie Collins, Jennifer Brooks actually, and she said that he knows how to write female characters. And it seems like a lot of male authors don't know how to do that. Don't know how to write female characters. They make them so passive and, so naive, and, there are women that are naive, there are people that are naive, but it's not just a girl thing. Now, the last thing I was going to talk about is I do not like the ending. I was a little disappointed by the ending, and it felt like, it feels, very rushed, considering how many long-winded bits of dialogue are in this book, and just elaborate explaining Dracula, and, explaining what they're up against and how to defeat him, and all the different things they have to use to protect Lucy, to try to save her, like the garlic smelling flowers, and keeping the windows and doors locked and all that. Yeah, the ending is so quick. Like I said, though, I feel like the 1992 movie Francis Ford Coppola enhanced the ending and everything else in the book. So, yeah, there are a lot of things that kind of bug me about the book, but I still appreciate the book for what it is, and I don't hate the book either. I think I definitely like it better than I did than as a teenager. And it's just, it's kind of cool to, read the story that kind of put vampires on the map, and really got people interested in them, and got them popular, and, because, granted, there were books like Carmilla, I think, came first, so, and I don't know the reception that book received, but, from what this is the most popular, and a lot of the things in here are still used today in vampire mythology. Now, it is, there's no reference to Vlad the Impaler in the book. We just all assumed that Vlad the Impaler was the inspiration for Dracula. But like I said, a lot of people say that Carmilla is what inspired Bram Stoker. But there's no reference to Vlad the Impaler. It's just it almost felt like you know perfect to have Dracula have been Vlad the Impaler. And in the 1992 movie, again, they include that aspect. They imply that he was Vlad the Impaler, and then when his wife commits suicide in the beginning of the movie, so it's not a spoiler, he decides, and he's told by his priest that in their belief system that she's gonna go to hell, and so that pisses him off, and he's all like, you know what? Then I'm gonna turn against God. I'm like, screw God, give God the middle finger, and I'm gonna become I'm gonna drink blood and become a vampire, and but there's nothing like that in this book. Like, we just start with Jonathan going to Dracula's castle, and his encounter when we don't even know how Dracula became a vampire. There's no backstory on Dracula, no other backstory. He's just exists. It's implied that Van Helsing is aware of him and knows a lot about vampires, which there's there's the Van Helsing movie where they supposedly have a history. Van Helsing just doesn't remember it. So it's kind of interesting how pop culture has essentially expanded the story, and like I said, made vampires, particularly like Dracula, into such tragic figures. Like, because he supposedly was human at one time. I mean, he had to have been. But this book, like I said, the book focuses more on the monster aspect. He's this monster they need to defeat. It's clearly a good versus evil story. It's not like evil has a lot of shades of gray, and evil is not, isn't completely bad. And one time evil was good, and there's a reason why he's evil, and he's just misunderstood. Like I said, the only thing is that there's, I think both Van Helsing and Mina pointed out, well, he was human at one time. But Mina's the only one who's like, oh, we have to remember he was human, so we should feel sorry for him and pity him. And like I said, in that case, it bugged me a little bit. But other than that, this is still a great story. It's just like, there are aspects that I don't like. But other than that, it's still great. It's beautifully written. It's just intense, and like I said, there's a great build-up and atmosphere created, and like I said, it's the original source, so I think you should definitely try it. Try to find out, get the original source, read the original book. As another reviewer said, though, if you don't, like the format, if you struggle with the format, then it might be a difficult read for you, but I do think it's worth just reading the original source material and getting to know what is popular today about vampires, what we know about them today. Like that, along with, and I like to also read Carmilla at some point, as well. I want to know what that whole story is and what that's about. But yeah, it's still kind of fun. I mean, it's tedious at times, but still, it's so, like, again, it's cool to get the source of information, the original source. So this is, that is Dracula. Okay, those are my thoughts on Dracula, and I have the 1992 movie, which I just was recently reminded to watch. This is one of the more closer adaptations, but like I said, he takes some liberties. He adds this romantic relationship between Mina and Dracula, because you find out that Mina is the reincarnation of Vlad the Impaler's wife before he became the Dracula, and when he turned from God, the whole committing suicide thing. So she is the reincarnation of her. So it adds a very interesting twist. Which, let's face it, despite that there's a lot of people who don't like the romance aspect, there's a lot of people who do like it. Romance translates in Hollywood, so people like romance in Hollywood. But I still think Gary Oldman as Dracula is still scary, you know? I mean, or at least creepy. We still get the creepy factor. Even if people don't like the romance, you still get the creepy factor. It's still a great movie. A very artsy movie. Like, there's a lot of people might find the whole beginning a little odd. What Francis Ford Coppola does in the beginning is a little weird. How he decides to tell the story, but it depends, because, like, he was trying to be creative, and it's a very artistic look on the movie, and very much a compliment to older movies. But it's, like I said, Gary Oldman plays Dracula, and then you have Van Helsing's played by Anthony Hopkins, who, I liked Van Helsing in the book, but Anthony Hopkins makes him a lot more interesting. 10 times more interesting, I think. Especially when he tells Mina what happened to Lucy after, how they killed her. It's a very funny scene, and, like, basically, is very blunt and tells her, we had to stab her and cut off her head, and Jonathan's like, doctor, have some bedside manner or whatever. And, it does have those are the oldest cast members. The rest are very young. They want a hot young cast. And like everybody else, I agree that Keanu Reeves was, miscast as Jonathan Harker. But he was I guess he was a known popular name at the time, so they wanted to cast someone that was, known. And Winona Ryder, who gave him the script. No, I don't think Winona's acting as bad as the other people. And, as other people have said in reviews. I think her acting is pretty decent in the movie. And then we have Richard E. Grant, which a lot of people might know him from Spice World. And I think he's done a few other things. I can't think of him at the moment. And then, Billy Campbell from The Rocketeer. I don't know what else he's done. And then Carrie Elmas, Princess Bride fame, and he was the stepfather in Liar Liar, and Men in Tights. Look, Mel Brooks is Men in Tights. He was Robin Hood in that one. And those guys play Lucy's three suitors. And probably, like I said, the best actors, of course, for Anthony Hopkins and Gary Oldman were the best performers in the movie. But, like I said, it stays pretty true. It follows the plot, but it does, again, it adds, like, a bit of a romance story, and, of course, it can't include every little detail. Like I said, I feel like we didn't get enough of Renfield, but we got the important aspects of Renfield, I think, the important scenes. And I think Renfield was pretty good too. Renfield's the actor who played Renfield, I can't think of his name, but that was a great performance in my opinion. There were some weird things in the, like, someone pointed out that the whole blue flame, which granted, I don't even remember. I don't remember that whole thing, exactly what that meant. It's something about Dracula being able to control things. Like, we know he can turn into mist. And I think that was part of Dracula's power, the blue flame, and they don't really explain it in the movie, so maybe I probably would have remembered it better in the movie, remember the whole deal with it better if it was more explained in the movie, like Van Helsing took the time to explain that, but maybe you could argue he didn't know. And actually, because of Mina's, and another thing that is really cool that kind of goes along with Mina's bond with Dracula is that there's this, she ends up having some of Dracula's powers, so it makes her more dangerous. Her character being one of Dracula's vampires, being transformed into one of Dracula's mistresses, because it also makes Jonathan Harker's role in the story also interesting, because, he's her husband, he loves her, and he doesn't want to hurt, and, it's not just she's being turned into a vampire, but it's also that she's is in love with Dracula. So it's even, and she believes herself being reincarnation, and she's the reincarnation of Dracula's wife. So she has this strong relationship with him. So I think it makes it even more, Jonathan Harker's part in the story even more interesting, because like he's caught in this situation where like he loves his wife and he sees Dracula as a monster. She's in love with a monster, and it's like, what do I do? How do I handle this? You know, how do I save my wife from this? You know, and am I going to be forced to kill her because of it? Like, he's put in an interesting situation, and so it makes his character more interesting, despite the fact he's played by Keanu Reeves, who I think was not a great actor at that time. So I like that added aspect. Of course, you know, I'm one of those people who will defend whenever YA because of romance in it. I like the romance. I mean, I won't read the romance genre all the time, because I'm not always in the mood. And as I've gotten older, I definitely kind of see the point of it's annoying when there's always a romance always shows up. It would be kind of nice to look at other types of relationships, not just romantic partners, but sibling relationships with friends, and people that are just friends, in relationship with a parent and a child. It would be kind of nice to see those kinds of relationships be the focus of the big plot that's going on in whatever fantasy story I'm reading. And then let's see what else. So yeah, that's really all I gotta say about the movie. I really enjoyed the movie. I think if you don't want to read the book, at least watch the movie, because you know it's as close to the original source material as you can get, and there are still things that aren't completely off about that aren't in the original book. Okay, so let's kind of update you. So after that, I am currently reading. I'm finally started reading this book. I obviously have not gone very far in this book, but this is the history of how the book Dracula was created and what led to Bram Stoker writing this book. And it's written by Dr. Stoker, his great grandnephew, and J.D. Barker. And so far we have Bram as a young boy, and he's very sickly. He has 4 other siblings, I think, and Matilda. Oh, that's where I got the name Matilda. The other book I'm reading, the character's name Matilda as well. There's Matilda. There's his older brother Thornley. And I think he has a baby brother named Richard. So actually, no, I think just 3 siblings. But because he's sickly, he doesn't spend he spends most of his time with Matilda and in his bed. Because he's sickly and he's constantly losing blood. He has a blood disease, I think. And they have I guess she's a nanny or a governess, Nana Ellen, and they're very close with her, and there's something weird with her. There's something strange about her, that she's constantly will be periods where she's sleeping for long periods of time, and she will disappear for long periods of time, like actually leave the house. And one night, Bram, after Bram has a really bad bad incident or whatever, bad moment of losing a lot of blood, his uncle tries to same with the whole tradition of, they believe back then that leeches are good for if you have a blood disease. But it's not Nana Ellen who saves his life, but his mom doesn't want to acknowledge that. And so he has this weird encounter with her during that time when she saves him. So he and Matilda they've already been suspicious of her. So one night they decide to follow her, and Bram has this really weird connection with her, like a psychic. Like imagine there's a thread between the two of them, and it's pulling at, and the thread is pulling at him, so he follows. One night they follow her into the woods, which was where they're not supposed to go. And the last part I read was her going into this pool of water and disappearing, and they don't know what's going on with her. They are worried that she's drowned or something. So that's the last thing I read. It's very interesting, and I definitely want to know what's going on with Nana Ellen. I have my suspicions, but I don't know. It could be something completely different. She doesn't, it might not be what you would think. So, I don't know, but, and so far it's really, and it's also written like a diary format as well, like the original Dracula. And when I'm reading it, I try to hear the Irish accent in my head because Bram Stoker is Irish, so I try to hear it in my head, but it's a little bit difficult to get it in my head. And I'm also not good at saying it out loud. I'm just going into an Irish accent anyway, so, but I'm still trying to read it like I'm Irish. But I think if you love Dracula, check it out. Check this out, because like I said, it's the origin of Dracula. And Dr. Stoker also wrote Dracula the Undead, which is a supposed sequel. Although I remember a while back looking at reviews for that, and it had mixed reviews, I think. Like, not everybody loved it. I remember enjoying it at the time when I read it. It's like a sequel and talks about the characters years later, and Mina and Jonathan have a son. And I think that one introduced a female vampire, which is interesting because people have said that Carmilla kind of inspired Bram Stoker, and so it's kind of interesting that Dr. Stoker decided to make the vampire, if I remember correctly, a female, and obviously Carmilla is a woman, so that was kind of interesting that he chose to do that. I do want to reread that one again. I have seen it at the Rose Office, but it's probably not there anymore. And I would have gone, but considering the weather, I'm probably not going to go to the bookstore today. So, anyway. So, I'm reading that. That's not Victorian literature, obviously, though. But it is in the Victorian time, so maybe I could cheat and count it. But I'm also reading the other book that has a character named Matilda is Agnes Gray, my first Anne Bronte. I believe she wrote 2 novels. I don't know if she wrote poetry like her sister Emily. I think Emily was the one who wrote poetry, as well as a novel. I think she only wrote 1 novel. I think Emily did. I'm not sure, but I'll look that up. But like her sister, she wrote about a governess, and our Agnes, our title character, she's this young woman. And she decides she's the daughter of a clergyman, and they're a middle class family, and she decides she wants to become a governess. And her parents, of course, her parents and older sister are like, "Are you crazy? Like, there's no way. You can't handle it, and you don't even know how to take care of yourself," which my first reaction was, who says? You can't keep her, like, how's she gonna know unless she tries? But then she gets the 2, she's right now, they let her go and let her do it because it's what she wants to do, and she was Agnes Gray is very stubborn, and she becomes a governess to the Bloomfields, and she learns the hard way that her parents were kind of right, that it's a hard job and not everybody can handle it, and governess is not treated very fairly. Her first family, the kids are spoiled brats, and they get away with everything, and then, of course, Agnes is blamed for everything that they do, like how spoiled and how undisciplined they are, and like their parents expect Agnes to know how to handle them, and this girl is a teenager, I think she's 15, in the book, maybe not, I mean, I want to say that they said she was 15, but maybe she was 15, maybe when they mentioned she's 15 was like a flashback to when she was young, when she was 15, maybe she's 18 now. I mean, Jane Eyre was only 18 when she finally, but she chose to leave and become a governess. Which Jane Eyre, the way, Jane Eyre clearly got lucky with Adele. Like, Adele was not that bad. But these three are just such spoiled brats, and they're like, order her around. And oh my god, what really got me is the son in this family. He kills birds. He takes pleasure in mutilating and torturing them. And Agnes is like, don't do this. That's wrong. This is a harmless creature. I mean, the worst that these birds will do is poop on you. The worst that they'll do is shit on you. And she's trying to tell him that, and he's like, no, I can do what I want. My dad says it's okay, and also his uncle lets him get away with it too. His uncle encourages him, which I guess we all have that relative who kind of encourages us to be a little mischievous and bad. And it just, the little prick is, and the parents, and the other family that she goes to is not as bad as the first family, but they're still bad. The kids are still bratty and won't listen to, the oldest though they're a little bit kinder. I mean, the servants aren't as kind as the servants in the other family, but, like, the servants in the first family, the Bloomfields, a little more sympathetic towards Agnes, but the servants in this one kind of look down on her just like the parents do and the kids do. But the kids are a little bit nicer to Agnes, but they're still, like, bratty and disrespectful, but they're not as mean to her as the kids in the Bloomfield family. And you just see how these parents are so not involved in their kids' lives. They just let them get away with stuff. Like, she is told by both mothers that, oh, you must let the kids do what they want. Let them get away with whatever they want. It's okay. And it just like drove me. It was like, my parents have always been involved in my life, and they never let me get away. They don't let me get away with stuff. I mean, we even had my mom even took some paint sticks and had to decorate them to use if we're ever really bad. My mom would use the paint sticks, So, and but my sister and I were, like, pretty good kids, so, I mean, occasionally we would get scolded, but, like, but other than that, we were good. We were not bratty, like, these three kids are, but it's just like, and the parents just let them get away with it, and the problem is partly because my parents were involved in mine and my sister's lives. They taught us right from wrong. They didn't have, like, we're not rich. We do not have servants or anything like that, so my parents were involved in our lives and would make sure we understood right from wrong, and why we shouldn't do anything. I mean, in the second family, the Murrays, one of the daughters curses like a sailor, which is something she's gotten from her father. She says that she's learned from her father, and the grooms that run their family stable, their house stables. And her mom is like, I expect you to be gentle with her, but tell her that saying curse words is wrong. It's like, how is she supposed to do that? I mean, I guarantee you the mom would not be happy with the old-fashioned method of soap in the mouth. Where, well, I'm going to wash your mouth out with soap. The mom would never forgive Agnes for doing that. But it's just so frustrating. I mean, like, the lack of involvement from the parents is so frustrating. They just expect Agnes to do everything, and they get mad at her if she can't handle the kids. It's like, whose fault is that? It's not Agnes's fault. I'm pretty sure it's your fault, but okay. But, of course, the problem is Agnes is in this position where she can't really say anything. She can only say so much to the parents. And this is her livelihood. She wants to keep her job. She wants to be independent, make her own money. So it's like she can only go so far. I mean, I just hope, this isn't a very long book, but I hope if Agnes would, after the story, if things do not end well for her, and by the end of the book, I would hope that beyond the story that there would be hope that she would have a better chance, and come across at least one good family with good kids. Like I said, Jane Eyre, the way Charlotte wrote Jane Eyre, Jane got pretty lucky with Adele. Adele was not bad. I mean, like, she was a little too, like, was told, like, she would sing inappropriate songs and stuff, like, but she didn't know any better, so it wasn't like, which, I guess, in defense of the little girl who said curse words, I gotta admit, it is hard to, when you get into the habit, like, granted, I'm an adult, like, but, and when I was a kid, I still don't like saying the F word, I refuse to say that word, but, like, my sister has a 6-year-old, and I think he's 6 right now, I think he turned 6, and, like, a 5-year-old, and a 1-year-old, so it's definitely, and I admit, it's kind of hard when you're so used to saying certain words that, and my cursing isn't even as bad. Like I said, I won't say the F word. But, like, certain words, my mom has to remind me, don't say it, because kids absorb things like sponges. And this little girl clearly absorbed the foul language. And I mean, it's hard to stop. Because if you're so used to saying it, the words just slip out. So the girl definitely has my sympathies in that department. But it's definitely, so I don't know how she can expect Agnes when Agnes is so limited to what punishment she can do. Now, I gotta admit, like, Agnes is a little more, like, she says things, she's more willing to say things. I mean, she doesn't cross the line, but she is more willing to say things than Jane Eyre was. Jane didn't always say, sometimes kept her thought to herself, and Deborah was good at not saying anything, like, when she had a strong opinion, but like I said, her situation with Rochester was not that bad, and, the worst problem that she had was, of course, the wife and the wife. But other than that, she had a pretty good situation. And, but of course, Charlotte was focusing more on her coming of age and, her romance. So she kind of gave Jane a little happier of a situation. But, yeah, so far it's definitely interesting. And I'm hoping to get the Wild Feeling, the, Tennant Hall. I don't remember the whole titles. But the other book that Anne Bronte wrote, I'm definitely going to get that one. And I'm going to try to get in the cloth-bound edition. Now, granted, if I come across it at some point, then I'll buy it. But I would ideally love another cloth-bound edition of a classic. So, and then the last book I'm reading is, Our Mutual Friend. But, I've decided to take my time with this book and not rush it. And plus, look how long, it's a chunky book. It's, let's see, not counting all the extra stuff, where it's notes and all that stuff. Let's see, not counting the notes. Let me get past the notes. There are a lot of notes in here. And of course, it's a postscript. Well, going by the postscript, postscript starts at page 798. So it's almost 800 pages. But from until when I read it, the last part I'll read. I mean, I might read the postscript, I might not. I'm definitely gonna read the note, the note at the end of Dracula, because that's where you kind of get some more information. But yeah, so 797 pages are at least of the reading of the actual novel. And like I said, we have the postscript, which is I think 3 pages, and then the rest are explanatory notes, like references, all the little bits and pieces. But I never really read those. I don't really, I mean, if I was studying literature like this, which I would love to do that, but, at this point, I'm just gonna read these and enjoy them. So I will probably never read the explanatory notes. But, again, what I think really helps me is when I look at reviews ahead of time, just as long as I don't give away too many spoilers. And these books are so long that I probably don't even remember if they spoiled anything. when I get around to reading it, but it does help me follow along a little bit more easier. So the novel starts with a man and woman, a father and daughter to be more specific, sailing on the Thames, and they find a dead body in the water, in the river Thames, which is the man, the father's, Mr. What's his name? Let's see. Gather Hexam is his name. Gather Hexam. He finds the dead body in the river, and that's what he does for a living. He collects dead bodies to give to, and gets money for returning the body of a dead family member to the families. And the body is of old John Harmon. John Harmon, who was supposed to inherit his father's money, and he got his money off of dust heaps, like collecting dust. Some of these jobs are really interesting in here. Some of the jobs that you wouldn't think would pay a lot, but they're very random jobs, like what Harmon's father did, and what Gaffer does is really interesting. And so it turns out that before he died, he was supposed to get married to this woman named Bella Wilfer, but unfortunately he died before that could happen. So his money that he was supposed to inherit goes to these two servants, the Boffins, a husband and wife. And there's a lot of characters that are introduced. The Veneerings are another characters that are introduced. I think from what Katie from Books and Things says, that Silas Wegg is another character that's supposed to be kind of the antagonist of the story. And I'm looking at the back too, but that's the thing about Dickens is I love Dickens, but sometimes it's hard to follow his stories, his plots, because there's so much going on. There's so many different characters. And I imagine it would help if I did audiobook. I was tempted to buy the audiobook of David Copperfield to read that to listen to that at some point. But I'm debating because, I'm trying to stick to my, $75, limiting myself to $75 per limit, so per month. And I like going to Books A Million. I actually like physically going to the store, But this edition includes the text from the first volume edition of 1865. It includes illustrations, which I like that. I like when these versions of when copies, editions of Dickens' work have illustrations. I think that's really cool, like original sketches and stuff. But I think that's why these penguins are probably good to get for classics, unless you really want something pretty, a really pretty edition. So that's how it's going. So that is my review of Dracula, my thoughts on Dracula in the movie, the 1992 movie. And that's also what is going on in my reading this month. So if you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, click subscribe if you haven't already, click the bell icon below if you want to be notified when I post new videos. And I hope your reading is going well, you're staying safe and healthy, and enjoying your own reading, which goes along with the hope reading is going well. And I will talk to y'all later. Alright, bye!